Last week, I posted the final video in our summer series, which included our route east on US 6 from Bishop, California to Provincetown, Massachusetts, and then north to Newfoundland and the Canadian Maritimes. Our return west took us back to Iowa for the RAGBRAI bicycle ride across Iowa, and then home via US 20. That's the ultra-condensed version of an incredible 15,000-mile journey. If you asked me to pick the highlight of the trip, I would have to say it was the people we met. Old friends, new friends, strangers who stopped and helped us along the way, and viewers who invited us to Moochdock on their driveways. It made for the most memorable journey of the 5 years that we've owned our van. In this video, I want to share our campground costs and fuel costs, the repairs that we made along the way and some that we didn't make, an update on the transit van that we ordered over a year ago, and then I have a public service announcement. So let's start with the mileage. I said 15,000, but actually it was 14,507 miles. And that's as close as we can get because we have tires that didn't come with our van. They're a little bit larger, and the calculation that we've come up with is about 5%. So I add about 5% to the mileage. We purchased 791 gallons of diesel. Now, of course, some of our trip was in Canada, so I've converted the liters over to gallons. And of course, I've also converted Canadian dollars to US dollars. So these are all numbers in US dollars. The total cost for fuel was $4,460. So my calculation is we got about 18.5 miles per gallon. If you're taking these long trips across the country, crossing over borders, you will notice that your mileage will fluctuate not just because of the terrain or the headwinds or things like that, but also because some states have adopted B20 for their diesel, and that means your mileage is going to be reduced. So it's a little bit hard to compare apples to apples when you're talking about fuel. I noticed that the lowest cost we paid was in Iowa, but Iowa is heavy into B20. So even though the cost might have been a little bit less, you're actually paying more because your mileage has diminished.
Straight cruising, headed for a bruising, watching out for number one. You gotta slow down and look around you, son. Today is just today and not tomorrow. Where you're going, rest your head. Where you're going, brightness looks big. Where you're going, truth cannot be hid. You gotta get going. Easy now. You gotta get going. Easy now. Be hard working so you can be deserving of the rest that you are given. You gotta slow down and look around you,
camping fees turned out to be quite a surprise to me. We averaged $16 over our 100-day journey. And a lot of that is thanks to Harvest Host. I did not include the Harvest Host membership fee in figuring this out, but we would have spent much more if not for Harvest Host, or we would have had to do some sketchy camping, because once you get east, it's really hard to find free spots to camp. And the Harvest Host spots were just fabulous. We stayed at an airport. We stayed in a strip mall parking lot. We stayed at a number of farms. And I became a fan of Harvest Host, even though we had a Harvest Host membership for several years ago, and never used it. But on this trip, it was absolutely invaluable. As far as reservations go, the only reservations I made were sometimes for a national park or a state park, and it was usually only 1 or 2 days out. Okay, now on to repairs. We made a few. The first thing was the generator exhaust pipe fell off, and we kind of fixed it on the road when we were in, I don't know where we were, Nevada, Utah, someplace. We thought we had gotten up there and snug enough that it would stay in place, but it eventually fell off when we were in New York. A really nice guy stopped us, offered to help, but we ended up just taking the pipe off and waiting till we got to Vermont to get it fixed, where we fixed it at my girlfriend's farm. That held really well, but John still wanted to change out the ties that hang underneath the van. There are two of these straps, and he ordered some and had them shipped to our son. So we didn't actually change those until we got all the way back to California. And we had the dealer look at it when we got back, and he said he thought everything was fine. So we decided not to switch out the pipe, even though it had been flattened on one end. The next repair we made was actually in New Brunswick at the Pleasureway rally we attended. We discovered that our water pump wasn't working properly, and fortunately, John had thought ahead, and we carried an extra one with us. That's one of the things that we really recommend you carry: an extra water pump and an extra propane regulator if you have propane. So we were able to switch that out there with the help of other people at the rally who had the tools we needed, and we're good to go. The third thing that broke was the handle on the valve of the black tank. We ordered one when we got to Vermont, and we were there for a week, so we were able to get it in the mail. And we fixed it there, although it isn't the right one. The handle isn't long enough, so we have to pull the valve from behind there's a kind of a cover. And so we'll have to get that fixed. One of these days we'll order the correct one and replace it. And then this is not something that had to be repaired, but we decided when we were in Canada that we would return home and get bigger brakes put on the van. So that has been done, and that will be a video coming up soon.
You say take me on a treasure hunt. I long for something new. Have you heard the fairies when they sing and dance? Oh, I wish it was me every night. When I close my eyes, I see beauty lives in me. I know I don't yet know it, so I trust you when you say that beauty lives in me too. when you say that beauty lives in me too. Beauty lives in me. I know I don't yet know it, so I trust you when you say that beauty lives in me too.
The third item is an update on the transit van. And some of you who are newer probably don't know this, but we ordered a Ford Transit so that we could have a new rig built on it by George at Humble Road. And we ordered it a year ago. It's been over a year now. Ford was not very good about keeping people informed. We've heard from a number of you guys who've also ordered transit vans. And then John was constantly checking the forums to see if there's any new information. But it was virtually impossible to get any information out of Ford or our dealer. But this couple weeks ago, John was finally able to reach someone at Ford who said that they've closed out all the 2022 orders, but they are going to make us a 2023 model, but they can't give us a date. So the update is there's not much to update except that we are still waiting. And, we got a great van to travel in, so it's not like we're too anxious. But I really feel badly for people who have ordered and waited and finally gave up and gave up on the order. One woman up in Canada said that they finally, after a year, decided that they would just buy a used van. They had actually ordered all the parts and all the components because they were going to do the build themselves. And finally, they just gave up on it. One of the strange things that happened just this last week is that Ford came out with a new model of their Transit called the Transit Trail. And on the trail, they put in a vent for you, and they do some other battery stuff. They do some upgrades, but it's because a lot of people are using the Fords to do their van conversions, and they're kind of helping them out. But I just don't know why they're coming out with a new model when they can't even fill the old orders that were placed over a year ago. But who knows what's going to happen? Who knows if we'll get a van? But whatever, we'll just keep hanging in there, hoping that someday we'll get our Ford Transit van. Next up is a request, and this comes by way of somebody who lives in Newfoundland. As you know, Florida was devastated by Hurricane Fiona, but so were the Canadian Maritimes. And when the hurricane, I knew that Canada was getting hit by this hurricane, and I was watching the news as best I could over the internet. And the pictures afterwards were just shocking. Port aux Basques got particularly hard hit, a place that we actually had spent the night before we left. And I know that where we camped that night, it's probably everything is just gone. All the homes and structures, they're just wiped out. I have a lot of video footage of us driving around because we were trying to figure out where to sleep that night. And so someone from, I think, Corner Brook asked if I would pass that on to you guys, and if you would care to donate anything you can to the Red Cross efforts up there would be wonderful. I will put a link below that goes directly to the folks in Newfoundland. And I've already donated, and if you have any spare change, please pass it along because it's a very small, it's a small province population-wise, and the needs are very great. The people up there were absolutely wonderful, so anything you can pass along would be tremendous. I'm sure I didn't cover everything. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the cross-country trip, any of that stuff. That's it for this video. Not sure if I'm going to have one next week. I might not, but it just depends on how much of a break I need to take. And in the meantime, if you haven't checked out Itchy Boots' last video, the one where she completes her journey from Patagonia to Prudhoe Bay in Alaska, you need to check that out. It was pretty good. She did a compilation of the whole journey, and it was pretty amazing. I'll leave you with that, and I thank you so much for following along on our journey, and I can't wait till we get back on the road again.
Fond are the memories, my mind's I recall. a train